The crystal chandeliers, the whispered reservations, the four-figure bottles of wine. Nothing in that Manhattan restaurant ever surprised anyone, until the richest woman in the room went pale at the sight of a $23 necklace on a black waitress's throat. Her chair scraped back, her hands shook, and in front of the city's elite she whispered, "Where did you get that?" Jasmine moved through Dominique the way she had been trained, quietly, efficiently, almost invisibly. The upscale Manhattan restaurant was designed so the wealthy could glide through their nights believing elegance happened naturally. What they never saw were the waiters calculating every step, every pour, every smile. And no one worked harder to stay unnoticed than Jasmine. Her uniform was flawless, crisp black shirt, pressed apron, polished shoes. Her hair was tied back in a neat bun, and her posture remained perfect even after 10-hour shifts. But the one thing that never quite blended in, the one thing that didn't belong to the restaurant, was the small silver heart necklace resting against her skin. The locket was simple, almost cheap, the sort of thing a teen might pick out at a street market. Yet to Jasmine, it was the most valuable thing she owned. It was the only belonging she'd had the day she was found as an abandoned newborn in a hospital bathroom. Foster parents had come and gone, beds had shifted from room to room, but this necklace had stayed. No one could tell her where it came from. No one had ever cared enough to ask. She wore it every day, not because it was beautiful, but because it was hers, maybe the only thing that ever had been. Tonight, her hands balanced a tray of scallops and risotto as she approached table 12. She recited the order in her head, her heartbeat steady, her expression practiced. Table 12 was always important. Politicians, CEOs, actors, sometimes all three. But tonight it was occupied by one woman whose reputation made the entire staff stand straighter. Margaret Lancaster. The name alone carried weight. Billionaire, industry icon, a woman whose icy poise could silence a boardroom and freeze an entire stock market with a single headline. Her silver hair was perfectly sculpted, every strand cooperating as if terrified to fall out of place. The diamond earrings she wore probably cost more than Jasmine would earn in 5 years. Jasmine had never served her before. Most servers avoided table 12 entirely, terrified of a mistake that could cost them their job. But her manager Robert, with his clipped tone and sharp eyes, had pointed directly at Jasmine tonight. "You'll take care of Mrs. Lancaster," he'd said, "and for the love of God, don't speak unless she asks you something." So Jasmine approached with a quiet inhale, placing the water glass gently beside Margaret's plate. "Good evening, Mrs. Lancaster. May I—" The sentence died. Margaret wasn't looking at the menu, or the food, or Jasmine's face. She was staring at the necklace. Her eyes widened, the pale color draining from her cheeks. The billionaire leaned forward so suddenly Jasmine almost stepped back. The room didn't fall silent immediately, but something shifted. Attention, subtle but unmistakable, pulled eyes toward them. Margaret's hand lifted, trembling, stopping inches from Jasmine's collarbone. "That necklace," she breathed. "Where did you get that?" Conversations faltered. Silverware paused midair. Even the piano music seemed to thin. Jasmine swallowed. "It's mine," she said carefully. "I've had it my whole life." Margaret's breath hitched, raw, fragile, disbelieving. Then she stood up so sharply her chair scraped across the polished floor, turning every head in the room toward them. "Come with me," she whispered. "Now." Jasmine didn't move at first. Her mind couldn't make sense of the command, of the billionaire's trembling voice, of the eyes suddenly fixed on them from every corner of Dominique. She had been warned since day one, never create a scene, never attract attention, never interrupt the comfort of the rich. And now the richest woman in the room was dragging her straight into the center of it. "Ma'am," Jasmine began carefully, but Margaret wasn't listening. "It's important," she insisted, voice cracking like thin glass. "Please, 5 minutes. Robert appeared out of nowhere, his polished shoes slicing across the marble floor. His expression was a strained mix of apology and panic, the look of a man watching his restaurant's reputation dangle by a thread. "Mrs. Lancaster," he said with tight politeness, "I'm sure we can address whatever the issue is without disrupting the other guests." Margaret shot him a look that could have frozen fire. She wasn't tall, but in that moment she seemed to tower. "This is not a disruption. This is personal." Her voice dipped lower. "And it cannot wait." The room had gone silent enough that Jasmine could hear plates settling on tables. Someone at a nearby booth whispered, "Is she crying?" Another murmured, "Lancaster never cries." A phone camera angled upward for a clearer view. Jasmine's pulse hammered in her ears. She felt exposed, judged, balanced on a knife edge she couldn't even see. Robert's jaw tensed. He looked to Jasmine, silently pleading with her to fix this before it spiraled. But what was she supposed to say? That a billionaire's near-panic attack over her necklace was normal. That she had answers she didn't. Margaret didn't wait for permission. She reached into her purse, pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, and set it on the table with a finality that silenced every last whisper. "This covers everything," she said, barely blinking. "Now, I need 5 minutes alone with her, in private." Jasmine stared at the money, then at Robert. He swallowed hard. Business always won. 5 minutes, he said stiffly. "In my office." The walk to the back felt endless. Jasmine could feel dozens of eyes burning into her back as though trying to decode her existence. She kept her chin steady, though her fingers were trembling around her empty tray. Inside the office, Margaret shut the door and pressed her palms against it as if sealing out an entire world. The space was small. Ugly, fluorescent light, overflowing file folders, a faint scent of old printer ink. None of it matched the surreal intensity radiating from the woman across the room. Slowly, Margaret turned to face her. Her face was pale, tears clinging to her lashes, mascara smudging at the corners. She wasn't the woman from magazines or business articles. She wasn't the billionaire who made executives melt. She was human, frightened, hopeful, terrified. "That necklace," she whispered. "I recognize it." Jasmine's throat tightened. "Ma'am, I really don't know what this is about. I've had it since you were a baby," Margaret finished for her. "I know, because I had one exactly like it made 27 years ago." Jasmine blinked. "For who?" "For my daughter," Margaret breathed. "The daughter I buried, and for the baby who disappeared the same night she died." Her gaze met Jasmine's, shaking, breaking, pleading. "That necklace," she whispered, "belonged to my grandchild." For a long moment, Jasmine couldn't breathe. The words hung in the cramped office like smoke, heavy and impossible to inhale. She stared at Margaret as if the older woman had just spoken in another language, because nothing she said felt remotely real. Jasmine had been called many things in her life: foster kid, ward of the state, charity case, but never grandchild. Never anything that suggested she belonged to someone. I think you're mistaken," Jasmine whispered, stepping back as if distance could make the truth less suffocating. "I'm nobody. I grew up in the system my whole life. I've never had family. Not ever." Margaret shook her head fiercely. "You're not nobody. You were taken." Her fingers trembled as she reached inside her purse again. "Look." She pulled out a phone and scrolled through pictures with frantic urgency. Then she stopped and turned the screen toward Jasmine. A smiling woman in her 20s. Dark hair, bright eyes, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. Around her neck, a small heart-shaped locket identical, down to the scratches, to the one Jasmine wore. "My daughter Caroline," Margaret said softly. "She wore that necklace every day. I had it made for her when she told me she was expecting. There were 2, hers, and one meant for her baby." Jasmine's knees weakened. She gripped the back of Robert's chair to steady herself. "But I wasn't adopted. They found me in a bathroom. No name, no birth record, nothing." Margaret blinked hard, tears spilling. "Because someone took you. Someone removed your hospital bracelet. Someone threw you away before anyone could realize who you were." The words thudded into Jasmine's chest like stones. She felt suddenly weightless and heavy at the same time, untethered from everything she thought she knew. "I don't remember anything," she said, "just what the files say. Found alone, wrapped in a blanket. The necklace was around my neck, but that's it. That's all they ever told me." "That's more than you think," Margaret whispered. "It's the only thing I've been searching for 27 years. Before Jasmine could respond, a soft click echoed from the door. The handle twitched. Footsteps shifted on the other side. Someone was listening. Jasmine glanced toward the sound, but Margaret didn't notice. She was focused entirely on her. "We need proof," Jasmine managed, her voice shaking. "We can't just assume." "A DNA test," Margaret said immediately. "I have access to a private lab. Discreet, fast. They'll come here." She didn't ask permission. She was already dialing. "If you are my granddaughter—" "If," Jasmine echoed hollowly. Margaret's gaze softened for the first time. "If," she agreed, "then you were stolen from me, and I will not rest until I know who did it." Jasmine felt the room tilt again. Stolen. The word tasted foreign. She had spent her entire childhood believing she wasn't wanted, believing she had been left behind because she was unworthy. Now this stranger was telling her she had been taken because she was valuable, loved, even before she took her first breath. Before she could speak, the office door eased open a fraction. A shadow lingered behind the crack. Robert's voice came through, forced casual but strained. "Everything all right in there?" Jasmine's spine stiffened. The unease in her stomach sharpened. Something about his voice, the timing, the tension. Whatever this was, someone knew more than they were letting on, and Jasmine's entire life was about to unravel. The DNA technician arrived faster than Jasmine expected, barely an hour after Margaret made the call. She entered through the service hallway, carrying a sleek black case instead of a menu, her expression calm in a way that made Jasmine's heart pound harder. Everything felt too fast, too surreal, like she had stepped into someone else's story. The technician took samples from both of them with quiet efficiency. A cotton swab, a labeled vial, a sealed packet slipping into the case. "We'll rush the analysis," she said. "Preliminary results within 3 hours. Final confirmation by morning." Then she was gone, leaving the office thick with silence. Jasmine exhaled shakily. "I still don't understand any of this." Margaret wiped her cheeks, trying to gather whatever pieces of composure she had left. "You don't have to understand yet," she said gently. "Just be here. That's enough." But enough had never been Jasmine's reality. She'd been a problem to be transferred, a file to be managed, a burden to be rotated between foster homes like a chore no one wanted. Now she stood in a cramped office with a billionaire telling her she mattered, and she didn't know how to hold that truth. Across the door, footsteps paused again. Much too close. Robert. Jasmine didn't see him, but she felt him, the way you feel a shadow slide over your back. His presence wasn't reassuring. It was wrong. Off. He'd been tense since the restaurant floor. Too tense. Not the way a manager worries about a VIP, but the way a man worries about a secret. Margaret noticed nothing. Her focus stayed on Jasmine, raw, terrified, determined. "When Caroline died," she said slowly, "I came back from Europe the moment I was told. I expected to hold my grandchild, to plan a future, to do what mothers do when tragedy strikes. But the hospital claimed everything was already finalized. Private adoption, they said. No records, no trail." Her voice hardened. "But someone lied." "My entire life," Jasmine whispered. All those years in the system. All the times I asked why I was left and no one cared to answer. Someone caused that? Margaret nodded once. Someone made a choice that destroyed 2 families, and they will not hide from it any longer. Jasmine paced the tiny room, her hands pressed to her temples. Why would anyone do that? Why take me? Why abandon me? Margaret hesitated, just a second, but Jasmine caught it. What aren't you saying? The older woman took a breath. My daughter was unmarried. The inheritance laws were complicated, and the Lancaster fortune is significant. Enough that the wrong person might have seen opportunity in tragedy. Enough that someone could profit from making you disappear. Jasmine felt sick, so she wasn't thrown away. She was stolen. Her chest tightened until breathing felt like work. This is insane, she whispered. This can't be real. It is, Margaret said quietly. And whatever truth we uncover, whatever name is attached to this, I will face it. With you, if you'll let me. Before Jasmine could respond, another sound cut through the tension. A soft thud outside the door, followed by hurried footsteps. Someone was retreating down the hallway. Jasmine and Margaret exchanged a look. Whoever had been listening wasn't done yet. And the truth, when it emerged, was going to be far uglier than either of them imagined. The preliminary DNA results arrived faster than either woman could fully prepare for. 3 hours after the samples were taken, the technician slipped back into the office, her expression careful and unreadable. She handed Margaret a sealed envelope, then glanced at Jasmine with something almost like sympathy before leaving. Margaret didn't sit. She tore the seal open with trembling fingers. Jasmine's breath locked in her chest. A beat. Another. Then Margaret pressed a hand to her heart and let out a sound that was half sob, half relief. It's you, she whispered. My God, it's really you. Jasmine froze, the room tilting. She wanted to say something, anything, but language felt too small for what was happening. She had spent her entire life believing she came from nowhere, that she was a mistake, someone abandoned. And now this woman, this powerful stranger, was crying again because Jasmine wasn't a mistake at all. Jasmine tried to speak, but tears blurred her vision. I had family this whole time? Margaret stepped forward, not hesitating this time. She pulled Jasmine into her arms, holding her like someone hugging hope itself. Jasmine stiffened instinctively, old survival habits, but then something broke open inside her, and she held on just as tightly. You were stolen, Margaret murmured into her hair. Not unwanted. Never unwanted. Across the hall, unseen behind the corner, Robert's face had gone a shade of gray that matched the tile floor. He backed away, pulse pounding, gripping the wall to stay upright. He had known this moment was coming the second he saw that necklace, but the confirmation still hit him like a blow to the chest. He needed to run. But where? And from whom? The grandmother was powerful. The granddaughter. Connected. And the truth? The truth was a wildfire waiting to consume him. As Jasmine and Margaret sat down trying to process the unthinkable, Margaret's voice shifted, low, controlled, a tone that belonged to the CEO who once dismantled corrupt corporations without blinking. Now we find out who took you, she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Someone made money, someone forged records, someone betrayed my daughter, and someone abandoned you in that bathroom. Jasmine swallowed hard. But that was 27 years ago. What if they're gone? What if there's no trail left? There's always a trail, Margaret said. People who commit crimes like this don't stop at one lie. They leave cracks, paperwork, transactions, mistakes. She reached for her purse, and I know investigators who can find those cracks. But before she could make a call, the office door creaked. Jasmine turned sharply. Robert stood there, not with authority, not with annoyance, but with defeat clinging to him like sweat. His hands trembled at his sides. Mrs. Lancaster. Jasmine. He swallowed, the words scraping his throat. I should tell you something. Margaret rose slowly. You've been listening. Yes, he admitted, shoulders sagging. I shouldn't have, but I did. And now I can't pretend anymore. I was there, at Newark General. I was a nurse, and His voice cracked. Jasmine's heart plummeted. What did you do? She whispered. He looked at her with hollow eyes carrying decades of guilt. I'm the reason you never went home. The room fell ice cold. Margaret's expression hardened into something lethal. Because Robert wasn't just a witness. He was part of the crime. And now, at last, the truth was starting to bleed through the cracks. For a long moment, no one spoke. The office felt smaller, darker, as if the air itself recoiled from the truth hanging between them. Jasmine's pulse thundered in her ears. Margaret's eyes were sharp, not grieving now, but calculating. And Robert stood frozen in the doorway, breathing like a man drowning. Jasmine finally found her voice. What do you mean you're the reason I never went home? Robert shut the door behind him, as though the hallway might swallow him whole. His hands shook as he leaned back against it. 27 years ago. I was a nurse. I was young, stupid, and drowning in debt. His voice cracked. Someone offered me $50,000 to move a baby. Just move her. That's what they said. Not steal, not harm. Just reroute paperwork, change a bracelet, shift the file. Jasmine felt nausea coil in her stomach. Me? He nodded miserably. I told myself it wouldn't matter, that wealthy families did private adoptions all the time, that the baby would end up somewhere safe, loved, but I didn't know the whole plan. I didn't know they wanted you gone. Margaret stepped forward, her presence cold and commanding. Who? She demanded. Who paid you? Robert shut his eyes. Victoria Ashford. The name hit Margaret like a strike. Her former business partner. The woman who had schemed behind her back, tried to fracture her company, and died with a trail of secrets buried under her legacy. She wanted you distracted, Robert whispered. She wanted your grief to swallow you so she could take over Lancaster Industries. Margaret's jaw tightened. Jasmine could almost see decades of pain knitting together, forming into something sharper. Purpose. What about abandoning her? Margaret asked, pointing to Jasmine as if she were proof of everything stolen. That wasn't part of any plan. Robert flinched. No, that was me. The money ran out. The pressure. The guilt. I panicked. I thought leaving her somewhere public, somewhere she'd be found, would erase my part in it. I convinced myself it was an act of mercy. He swallowed hard. I was wrong. I was a coward. The word hung there. Jasmine's hands balled into fists. She had dreamed of apologies her whole life, some explanation, some reason she wasn't wanted. But this wasn't comfort. This was betrayal wrapped in excuses. You left me in a bathroom, she whispered. A newborn. Alone. I could have died. I know, Robert choked, and I've lived with that every day. Margaret's voice cut through his confession like a blade. You're done running. You will give sworn statements, every detail, every name, every forged signature. You will testify. Robert didn't argue. He simply nodded, because he knew the alternative. Authorities arrived within hours. Robert didn't resist when they led him out the back entrance, away from cameras. Jasmine watched him go without a word. Some wounds didn't heal with apologies. Some histories weren't meant to be forgiven. Weeks turned into months. Investigations expanded. Records surfaced. The truth unraveled piece by piece, and for once, Jasmine felt the weight of injustice shifting, not crushing her, but lifting off her shoulders. Margaret stayed beside her through every step, fierce and unwavering. And slowly, Jasmine built something new. She finished nursing school. She spoke at hearings pushing for reforms. She visited foster homes and hospitals, using her story as a beacon, not of tragedy, but of transformation. One evening, standing beside Margaret at a charity event, reporters asked what she hoped others would learn from her journey. Jasmine touched the small silver necklace now resting against her collarbone. Her mother's, her connection, her proof. "That love survives," she said softly. "Even when people fail, even when systems break, truth finds its way home." And this time, she believed it.